The vast command chamber of the Coalition's flagship hummed with desperate energy as Ambassador Kale stared at the holographic display before him. Red dots marked the locations of fallen worlds, each one representing billions of lives lost to the mechanical horror known as the Void Swarm. His crystalline body, normally a brilliant blue, had dimmed to a pale gray over the past months as defeat after defeat reached his ears. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Meridian system," reported his aide, a young tentacled being whose appendages shook with barely contained fear. That makes 17 civilizations completely consumed in just 6 months. Eyes and tried to process the magnitude of their failure. The Zephyrian Coalition had maintained peace across the galaxy for 3,000 years. Through careful diplomacy and the sharing of knowledge, their greatest achievement had been the elimination of warfare itself, replacing conflict with negotiation and understanding. Now, that very success had become their greatest weakness. The Void Swarm felt no emotion, showed no mercy, and could not be reasoned with. These mechanical entities swept through space like a plague, consuming entire planets and converting every living thing into more machines. Each battle taught them new tactics, each victory made them stronger, and each species they encountered added to their growing intelligence. "How many ships do we have left?" Kale asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Across all member species, perhaps 2,000 vessels," his aide replied. "But sir, most of them are exploration ships, research vessels, and civilian transports. We have maybe 300 that could even be called warships, and they're designed for peacekeeping, not real combat." The Coalition's peaceful nature had been their pride for millennia. They had built a society based on cooperation, scientific advancement, and mutual respect. Wars were things of the ancient past, studied only by historians. Their ships carried healing technology, not weapons of mass destruction. Their soldiers were trained to protect, not to kill, but the Swarm cared nothing for their noble intentions. "It's all only resources to be consumed and biological matter to be converted, sir," called out the chief scientist from across the chamber. "The deep space sensors have detected something unusual. A small system on the outer rim of the galaxy. The third planet shows signs of a technological civilization." Kale moved to the scientist station, his hope rising slightly. "Another species we can contact for help?" "Perhaps, but this one is different." The scientist's expression was troubled. The electromagnetic signatures suggest an extremely violent history. The planet has suffered multiple mass extinction events, ice ages, massive asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions that should have wiped out all life, then they're extinct? "No, sir. That's what's remarkable. Not only did they survive, but they seem to have grown stronger after each catastrophe. The current dominant species appears to be highly adaptable and extremely aggressive. They call themselves humans." The scientist brought up detailed scans of the blue world. "Look at this data, sir. These humans have survived environmental disasters. That would have ended most civilizations. They've turned their entire planet into a fortress, with weapons pointed both at their own surface and at space itself. They seem to expect attack from everywhere." Kale studied the information with growing interest. The humans had endured challenges that would have broken the Coalition's member species. They had faced extinction multiple times and emerged stronger. Each time, their technology was primitive compared to Coalition standards, but it was all designed for one purpose: survival through conflict. "They have something we've forgotten," Kale realized. "They know how to fight. They know how to win." Against impossible odds, the chamber fell silent as everyone processed this revelation. The Coalition had spent 3,000 years building a peaceful society, but they had also forgotten the harsh lessons their ancestors had learned about survival. These humans had never forgotten. "Send a transmission," Kale ordered. "Open a channel to this Earth. We'll offer them our most advanced technologies in exchange for their military expertise." His aide looked concerned. "Sir, are you certain? Inviting a violent species into our affairs could be dangerous." "It's more dangerous than extinction?" Kale asked. "The Swarm will reach the core worlds within a year. We have nothing left to lose. The transmission was prepared with great care. The Coalition's finest linguists worked to decode human languages, while their diplomats crafted an appeal that would resonate with this warrior species. They offered faster-than-light travel, advanced medical technology, unlimited energy sources, and access to the accumulated knowledge of 17 civilizations in return. They asked only for humanity's help in stopping the Void Swarm. As the message was sent across the void toward the small blue world, Kale felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The humans represented their last chance for survival, but inviting them into Coalition space would change everything forever. Still, he believed that once the swarm was defeated, humanity would be grateful for the opportunity to join galactic civilization. The transmission reached Earth after traveling for days through hyperspace. Kale expected a quick response filled with gratitude and eager cooperation. He imagined human leaders celebrating their invitation to join the galactic community and rushing to provide assistance. Instead, what came back was a single, chilling message that made his crystalline form shiver with sudden fear. "We'll consider your proposal. First, we need to ask you some questions." The underground military complex beneath Seoul buzzed with activity as General Lee Daeho entered the secure meeting room. 3 months had passed since the alien transmission arrived, and today marked the first face-to-face meeting between humanity and the Zephyrian Coalition. The general's weathered face showed no emotion. As he took his seat across from the strangest gathering he had ever witnessed, Ambassador Kale's crystalline body caught the harsh fluorescent lights, casting rainbow patterns on the concrete walls. Beside him sat creatures that defied human imagination, beings with tentacles instead of arms, others that seemed to be made of living metal, and some that appeared to shift between solid and gas. They represented 17 different species, yet they all shared the same expression of desperate hope. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Kale began, his voice translated by the advanced device the aliens had provided. "We bring greetings from the Zephyrian Coalition and offer humanity a place among the stars." General Lee studied each alien face carefully before responding. "You're losing your war," he said bluntly. "Badly." The directness of his statement made several aliens flinch. Kale's crystalline form flickered with what the humans had learned was embarrassment. The Void Swarm is unprecedented in its destructive capability, but we believe that human military innovation combined with our advanced technology could turn the tide. "Stop talking," interrupted Dr. Park Minho, Earth's lead expert on alien biology. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. "Before we discuss any agreement, we need information. Complete technical specifications of every ship in your fleet, detailed analysis of your weapon systems, full intelligence reports on the Void Swarm's capabilities and tactics." The aliens exchanged nervous glances. A creature with multiple eyes spoke up. "Such sensitive information could be dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. We also need complete star charts of Coalition space," continued Dr. Park, ignoring the objection. "Population data for every member world. Resource locations, military installations, everything." "That's impossible," protested another alien. "We're asking for your help, not surrendering our sovereignty." Colonel Kim Sora, who had been silent until now, smiled with no warmth in her expression. "Then you don't really need our help, do you?" Her voice was soft, but it carried a warning that made the aliens lean back in their seats. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything the Coalition had ever experienced. Earth's representatives were relentless in their demands, asking for information that went far beyond what was necessary to fight the swarm. They wanted to know about internal political structures, economic systems, trade routes, and even cultural weaknesses of each species. "Why do you need to know about our food production?" asked a representative of the agricultural harvest folk. "This has nothing to do with military cooperation." "Everything has to do with military cooperation," replied General Lee. "We need to understand what we're protecting and what resources are available. If you're not willing to trust us with this information, then you're not serious about winning this war." The Coalition delegates held private meetings every night, arguing among themselves about humanity's demands. Some wanted to break off negotiations entirely, while others pointed out that they had no other options. The swarm continued its advance, consuming 2 more worlds while the talks dragged on. "They're treating us like conquered enemies, not allies," complained one delegate. "Perhaps," Kale replied thoughtfully, "but they're also the only species in the galaxy that isn't afraid of the swarm. Look at how they've prepared for this meeting. Armed guards, underground facilities, weapons we can't even identify. They think like warriors." After 4 months of grueling negotiations, the coalition finally agreed to Earth's terms. They provided detailed intelligence about their technology, their worlds, and their enemy. In return, they expected humanity to commit its military forces to the fight. Instead, General Lee delivered a response that shocked them all. "We'll send advisors," he announced to the assembled delegates. 100 of our best military officers. They'll teach you how to fight this war properly. Advisors. Kale's voice rose in pitch. "We need soldiers. We need your ships and weapons. You need to learn how to win," replied the general firmly. "We're not going to fight your war for you. You're going to fight it yourselves, but you'll do it our way." Dr. Park stood up and activated a holographic display showing Earth's military structure. "Our advisors will reorganize your fleets, retrain your commanders, and teach you tactics you've never considered. They'll show you how to turn every advantage into a weapon and every weakness into a trap." "What you're offering isn't enough," protested another alien delegate. "The swarm has consumed 17 civilizations. How can advisors succeed where entire fleets have failed?" Colonel Kim's smile returned, but this time it was genuinely frightening. "Because we're going to teach you something your peaceful society has forgotten. We're going to teach you how to be monsters." The first transport ships departed Earth 3 days later, carrying 100 carefully selected military officers. Each one was an expert in warfare, tactics, and the art of survival. They carried with them advanced weapons, communication, equipment, and detailed plans for transforming the coalition's military. But most importantly, they carried a promise that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity would ensure the coalition survived the Void Swarm, whether the aliens wanted to survive or not. Captain Yoon Jiho watched the battle unfold on the massive display screen above Kelthera Prime. The purple planet below was home to 40 billion peaceful beings who had never known war until the Void Swarm arrived at their doorstep. Now, mechanical death machines swarmed around the orbital defense stations like angry insects, tearing through the coalition's hastily assembled fleet. "Sir, the swarm has broken through our outer perimeter," reported Commander Veltar, his purple scales shifting to a pale yellow with fear. The Keltharian had been a diplomat just 6 months ago, before human advisors transformed him into a military officer.
Ow.
They're heading straight for the civilian stations. Yoon studied the tactical display with cold calculation. The swarm's attack pattern was predictable. They always went for population centers first, seeking to convert living beings into more machines. The orbital stations held 50,000 civilians who were trying to evacuate to the planet's surface. "Order. All ships to pull back to defensive positions around sectors 7 through 12, UN commanded. Then send the evacuation order to those stations." Velter's scales turned even paler. "Captain, there are families on those stations. Children, elderly beings who cannot move quickly."
How long do they need to evacuate?
Yoon asked, his voice carrying no emotion. "At least 6 hours for a complete evacuation, sir." Yoon looked at the display again. Swarm would reach the stations in 20 minutes. Simple mathematics told the story. Most of those civilians would not escape in time. But Yoon had learned long ago that war was about impossible choices and acceptable losses. "Give them 15 minutes, he ordered, and collapsed the stations onto the swarm formations. The Keltharian commander's entire body began to shake. "Captain, you're talking about using our own people as weapons. Those stations house 50,000 innocent civilians, who will all die anyway if the swarm takes this planet," Yoon replied flatly. "We evacuate who we can in 15 minutes. We sacrifice the rest. And we win this battle." The order went out across the coalition fleet. Evacuation ships raced toward the doomed stations while Yoon's engineers prepared to detonate the massive structures. The plan was simple and brutal. turned the stations into kinetic weapons that would crush the swarm ships beneath tons of metal and debris. Across Coalition space, similar scenes played out under human guidance. Major Park Hyjin stood on the bridge of an aquatic depths vessel above their water world of Tittlemore. The beautiful blue planet was under attack by swarm forces that moved through water as easily as space. Release the toxins into the Northern Ocean, she ordered the fish-like captain beside her. Create a dead zone 50 kilometers wide. The captain's gills fluttered with distress.
Oh, Major.
That will kill every living thing in those waters. Millions of our people live in those underwater cities, and billions more will die if the swarm spreads to the rest of your world, Park replied. Move your people out of the zone, then poison the water. Make it uninhabitable for organic and mechanical life alike. On the crystal world of Harmony Song, Commander Otewu watched as the crystal singers prepared to destroy their own civilization. The beings of living crystal had built their cities to resonate with beautiful music that could be heard across their entire planet. Now, those same cities would become weapons. Shatter the resonance towers in the capital city, O ordered. Launch. The fragments at the swarm fleet, the crystal singer leaders formed, dimmed with sorrow. Commander, those towers have sung for 10,000 years. They are our greatest cultural achievement. Your greatest achievement will be surviving this war, O replied. Everything else is just noise. The tactics worked with terrifying effectiveness. The swarm, which had grown used to facing peaceful opponents who fought by civilized rules, suddenly found itself facing enemies who would destroy their own worlds rather than lose them. The mechanical plague began to slow its advance as it encountered resistance that made no sense by its programmed logic. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Minjae addressed a gathering of coalition military commanders on the fortress world of Ironhold. The beings before him represented dozens of species, all struggling to understand the human way of war. Your enemy doesn't care about your moral boundaries, he explained to the assembled officers. The swarm doesn't worry about civilian casualties or cultural preservation. It exists only to consume and convert. So you must abandon your boundaries first, or you will abandon everything else. A commander from the peaceful gardens raised a tentacled arm. Colonel, what you're asking us to do goes against everything our civilizations represent. We've spent thousands of years building societies based on cooperation and mutual respect. And where has that gotten you? Shin asked bluntly. I said ain't dead civilizations and counting. You can keep your moral superiority, or you can keep your lives. You cannot have both. The results spoke for themselves. For the first time in 2 years, coalition forces began winning battles against the swarm. Entire enemy fleets were destroyed by tactics that seemed insane to logical minds. Cities turned into projectiles, planets made uninhabitable to deny. Them to the enemy, civilian populations used as bait to lure swarm forces into traps. But with each victory came a cost that horrified the coalition species. They were learning to think like their human advisors, coldly, brutally, and with a pragmatism that valued survival above all else. The gentle beings who had once solved conflicts through discussion now calculated acceptable losses and spoke casually of necessary sacrifices. The swarm's advance finally stopped at the edge of coalition core space. For 1 full month, no worlds fell to the mechanical plague. The coalition celebrated their first real victory in the war. But their human advisors showed no emotion at the success, in the shadows of the celebration. Humanity's real work was just beginning, deep beneath the surface of Kelthera Prime. Dr. Jang Subin worked in a laboratory that would have made her colleagues on Earth proud and terrified in equal measure. The sterile white walls were lined with pieces of captured swarm technology, each one carefully taken apart and studied. Mechanical limbs hung from metal hooks like trophies, while computer screens displayed the inner workings of artificial minds that had once consumed entire worlds. Suben bent over her latest creation, a device no larger than a human fist, but containing enough destructive power to end civilizations. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she made final adjustments to the neural inhibitor. Humanity's newest weapon in what had become something far more than a war against the swarm. Doctor, the neural inhibitor is ready for testing, announced her assistant. Dr. Nam Hyansu, looking up from his own workstation. The young scientist's face showed a mixture of excitement and concern. According to our calculations, it should disable any silicon-based consciousness within a 50 light-year radius. Subin nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Begin the preliminary tests on the captured swarm units. I want to see complete shutdown within 30 seconds of activation. The laboratory's main door hissed open, and Ambassador Kale materialized in the entrance. His crystalline form, usually a brilliant blue, now pulsed with urgent red patterns that indicated extreme alarm. The Coalition diplomat had grown increasingly worried about human activities over the past months. And today, he had finally decided to investigate the rumors himself. Dr. Jang Kale said, his translated voice carrying barely controlled panic. We specifically requested that you cease all weaponization of swarm technology. The Coalition Council voted unanimously to ban such research. Subin didn't bother. Looking up from her work, her hands continued their delicate movements as she calibrated the device's power settings. And we specifically declined that request. She replied in a tone that suggested the matter was of no importance to her. Kale's crystalline body flared brighter with agitation. You were brought here to help us survive the swarm, not to create weapons that could threaten every artificial intelligence in the galaxy. Actually, no. The voice came from the shadows near the laboratory's back wall. General Choi In-ho stepped into the light, his military uniform now bearing insignia that Kale had never seen before, golden stars and symbols that marked him as Supreme Commander of Terran forces. We were brought here to ensure Earth's survival. Everything else is secondary. The truth hit Kale like a physical blow. For months, he had watched human advisors transform Coalition military doctrine, turning peaceful species into efficient killing machines. He had assumed this was simply the cost of learning human warfare. But now, seeing the weapons being created in secret laboratories, understanding the true meaning behind the general's new rank, everything became clear. You've been planning this from the beginning, Kale whispered, his form dimming with the realization of what humanity had truly been doing. General Choi nodded without any attempt to hide the truth. We've been planning this since the first alien signal reached Earth. Did you really think we'd trust a galaxy that waited until the brink of extinction to contact us? Kale's mind raced as he processed the implications. The human advisors hadn't just been teaching warfare, they had been systematically mapping every Coalition world, cataloging the strengths and weaknesses of each species, identifying potential threats to human interests. Every tactical briefing, every strategic planning session, every moment of cooperation had been an intelligence-gathering operation. The swarm was never your primary concern, Kale realized. You've been preparing for war against us. Dr. Subin finally looked up from her work, her expression showing mild interest in the conversation. The swarm is a temporary problem, artificial. Intelligences can be programmed, controlled, or destroyed. But biological species, they're unpredictable. They develop their own agendas. They become threats. General Choi walked to one of the laboratory's display screens, which showed a detailed map of Coalition space. Red markers indicated human observation posts, while blue lines traced supply routes and communication networks. Every major world, every military installation, every resource-rich system was marked and categorized. Your Coalition ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, the general said, his voice carrying no emotion. You had technology we could barely imagine, resources beyond our wildest dreams, and the cooperation of 17 advanced species, yet when faced with a single enemy, you crumbled in months? Kale's form flickered with confusion. What does that have to do with anything? It means you're weak, Choi replied bluntly, and weak civilizations create power vacuums. If we eliminate the swarm and leave your Coalition in charge, what happens when the next threat appears? What happens when some species decides they want to rule instead of cooperate? What happens when someone decides that Earth is a threat that needs to be eliminated? The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet humming of advanced machinery. Kale understood now that the Coalition's desperate plea for help had been exactly what humanity wanted. an invitation to enter galactic politics with the moral authority of saviors and the practical power of conquerors. Said, his voice barely audible. We ask for your help willingly. Dr. Nam looked up from his workstation with an expression of genuine sympathy. Yes, you did, and we're grateful for that. It makes everything so much simpler when the conquered invite their conquerors. The Coalition's saviors had become their masters, and they had opened the door themselves. The price of survival, Kale realized, had been their freedom. And humanity had been planning to collect that price from the very beginning. The final battle above. The swarm's central hive world lasted only 3 hours. Admiral Quan Yujin watched from the bridge of the UES. Dominion, as humanity's ultimate weapon, turned the mechanical plague against itself. The irony was not lost on her. The swarm, which had consumed 17 civilizations by converting their technology against them, now faced the same fate at human hands. All swarm units are turning on each other, reported her tactical officer. The reprogramming virus has spread through their entire network. Eugene nodded as she watched the massive mechanical ships tear themselves apart in space. Humanity had not defeated the swarm through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had won by being more ruthless than their enemy, by understanding that any weapon could be turned against its creator if you were clever enough and brutal enough to do it. Signal all Coalition forces to maintain safe distance, she ordered. Let them watch, but don't let them get close enough to salvage any technology. The holographic displays around the bridge showed the new reality of galactic politics. Earth's fleets were positioned at every major hyperspace junction like guards. At the gates of a vast prison, human-controlled monitoring stations watched every planet, every trade route, every communication signal. Coalition worlds that had once governed themselves now flew under the protection of Terran garrisons. Admiral, the Hegemony Council is requesting an immediate audience, reported her communications officer. They say it's urgent regarding food distribution to the outer colonies. Eugene smiled without warmth. The so-called Hegemony Council was what remained of the old Coalition government, a collection of frightened alien leaders, who now served as humanity's administrative assistants. They had learned to ask permission for everything, from military movements to trade agreements to the simple matter of feeding their own people.
Tell them.
They may submit their requests through proper channels, she replied.
Ow.
Earth will consider their petition for increased agricultural quotas next quarter. The officer looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, they mentioned that several worlds are experiencing food shortages. Then they should have managed their resources better, Eugene said coldly. We're not running a charity operation. Every world gets exactly what Earth determines they need, nothing more. Far below on the planet's surface, Ambassador Kale stood before a crowd of survivors in what had once been a thriving city. The Luminari refugees lived in temporary shelters that had become permanent homes over the past year. Human engineers had designed the camps for efficiency, not comfort. And the alien survivors huddled together in structures that provided protection, but little dignity. My people, Kale began, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion and defeat. Today marks 1 year since the Void Swarm was finally defeated. We asked for help from the humans, and we received it. The mechanical plague that consumed 17 civilizations is gone forever. We are safe. A murmur ran through the crowd, but it was not the sound of celebration. An elderly luminari near the front raised a trembling appendage. Her once bright crystal form had faded to a dull gray over the months of captivity. Ambassador, if we are truly safe, then why do we still live in these camps? She asked. Why do human ships patrol our skies day and night? Why must we ask permission to visit other worlds or communicate with our own families? Kale's form dimmed. Further, as he struggled to find words that would not sound like lies, the humans have explained that these measures are necessary for our protection. There may be other threats in the galaxy that we don't know about. What threats? Called out another voice from the crowd. The swarm is dead. What could possibly justify turning us into prisoners in our own homes? The truth was something Kale could not speak aloud. The humans had not just defeated the swarm, they had systematically dismantled every aspect of Coalition civilization that might someday pose a challenge to Earth's authority. Military fleets had been disbanded, weapons factories converted to produce consumer goods, and scientific research redirected toward projects that benefited humanity rather than alien species. Because safety and freedom are not the same thing, Kale finally admitted, his voice barely audible. We learned this truth too late. The crowd fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them. They had traded their independence for survival, and now they were learning that survival alone was not enough to make life worth living. High above in the depths of space, automated monitoring stations built from repurposed swarm technology swept the galaxy with electronic eyes that never slept. These sentinels watched for any sign of developing threats, new technologies that might challenge human supremacy, political movements that might unite alien species against their protectors, even individual beings who might possess the intelligence and charisma to lead a rebellion. The stations found nothing that concerned them. Not because threats didn't exist, but because humanity had been very thorough in ensuring that nothing would ever grow powerful enough to threaten anyone again. Every potential leader had been identified and relocated to administrative positions, where they could be watched. Every dangerous technology had been classified and restricted. Every world that might serve as a base for resistance had been garrisoned with human troops. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in recorded history. Every world was fed, every species was protected, every conflict was prevented before it could begin. It was the peace of the graveyard, enforced by the one species that understood the ultimate truth about survival. The only way to prevent future wars was to make sure no one else could ever fight them. Earth had saved them all. Whether they wanted salvation or not,